Hang on, it's empty here. Yeah, just going to be discussing some of why we like tabletop role-playing games, I guess. Well, no, I guess that's what's been. It's not fully back to form yet, but we're closer than we were to that at least. Um, but yes, this is. Yeah. So, um, this is quite a simple thing in some ways, right? It comes down to a relatively simple explanation that they are the superior version of tabletop role playing games on computer. They um, they are more flexible. They allow for the exploration of any world or character. And they don't come with the somewhat inevitable currently limitations, and to some degree almost always inevitable limitations of a coded world, right? If you have to build a conversation tree, you end up losing the flexibility that having a conversation with someone, right, actually has. You can't, but because there has to be a conversation tree, effectively, you are less flexible in what you say in RPG, and the answers are, of course, themselves limited as well. You can't. So that's one limitation, of course. It's not the only one, but it's a good example of that limitation. There's going to be um, limitations to physics engines, and the rules of the world are going to have specifics to them. There's not the same level of capacity to personalize things, because you can't possibly personalize everything to everyone when you're making a computer game. That would be completely and utterly ridiculous to ask. Given the sheer amount of work that goes into making an RPG anyway, and then to ask them to personalize that for everyone who might play it. I mean, even if you only sell 1,000 copies, you're adding an extra you're adding a significant chunk of extra work for every additional person, and so that's a completely impossible task. It's completely unreasonable to request. So um, yeah. So the simple answer effectively is that they are the less limiting, and therefore, by our estimation, superior form of the role-playing game. The slightly more complicated answer is that it's to some degree a nostalgic thing, right? They provided us for discovery, and still do to a lesser degree. The ability to explore and express our plurality. Before we really knew what was going on, it was a way for those of us who weren't hosts at the time to just sit back, or not sit back, to have a level of control for a little bit over something, to take front and do something fun and meaningful while we could be ourselves. you know. And that's still something that we will do to some degree, but far less so, you know, rather than making effectively a carbon copy of one of us as best we can within a system, right? It's just a way to have some fun and maybe explore one or two specific things, right? Rather than the entire situation. Um, yeah. And of course, part of it as well is that unlike computer-based role-playing games, well, okay, it's not entirely true. MMO RPG does allow for a level of sociability and the ability of friendships, but not all RPGs are MMORPGs, obviously, and so there's a limitation there. But for tabletop role-playing games are almost inherently a social game. There are solo play tabletop, there are solo play TTRPGs, but those are relatively few and far between in comparison. And so they're a way to be sociable, to connect with people, you know, to just sit down and have a good time with people without the. Uh, there's less inherent cost to them than a lot of other social activities. You know, you don't have to go out and buy drinks or anything, which is useful. You don't necessarily even have to travel much, depending if you're willing to play online or not. You know, which is definitely a benefit, and of course, there isn't the same expectations in many ways, right? You know, you get to be not human, you get to be not of this world, right? You're allowed to just be who you are in many ways, right? It doesn't matter as much what you actually look like or what the body looks like, right? It doesn't matter as much what the body sounds like naturally, right? The character is the character and can just be, you know, in good spaces at least, right? With the right people around you. And that's very helpful sometimes, you know? It's good to just be. And then, yeah, you know, I think part of it as well, I don't know, this is going off script a little bit, but and theorizing, but I do genuinely suspect that part of it comes down to the fact that they were really our first exploration of independence. You know, it was the first time we did something that was truly just for us. Like, that people didn't have control or say over in the same way. You know, it was just a thing that we did to have fun. It was an interest we'd found entirely on our own that wasn't subsumed by the people around us in the same way. Which was helpful, right? And yeah, of course, there's also the fact that in TTRPGs you can be characters that can make a difference to the world, you know, relatively easily in many ways. Which it can help make the real world feel more changeable as well. You know, it's easier to believe you can change the world when you've sat down and done something where you change the world, right? It's easier to recognize, you know, like the first tabletop role playing game we played was Shadowrun. Fifth edition, to be specific, was before sixth came out or Anarchy came out. Um, we're probably never going to play sixth edition because, from what we've seen, they really messed it up with sixth edition. Anarchy seems like a reasonable idea though, in terms of it's like a nice, sensible, stripped down rule set, which compared to the massive complexity of fifth is probably a good thing. Yeah, because fifth is a complete meh. Fifth is a lot of crunch, but is good, and then sixth is just a complete mess. And I think Anarchy is far less crunch and also less of a mess than sixth. So we might play that at some point specifically. Don't know. But yeah, it was like just a plucky band of. Well, okay, let's face it. The entire party were, to some degree or another. Well, I mean, there's the Shadowrun, so we're not exactly plucky do-good heroes where a bunch of criminals looking to survive and make money. But, right, set out to do some stuff, set out to get paid and make some money, and actually got paid, made some money, right? Made something of a name for ourselves, got pulled on some pretty big jobs, and then, yeah, barely made it out of their lives and wet, effectively. That was how that went. It was good, it was fun, it was actively enjoyable. And then, it was like our first experience, right? We did something. We impacted the world. Now, sure, it was a fictional world, but our character had made an impact on the world, like an actual impact, which is it being a cyberpunk setting. Like, it's not cyberpunk in that it's not the game cyberpunk. It's Shadowrun, which is a different world, but it's a cyberpunk setting. It's a cyberpunk fantasy setting. Well, about 6 years in the future. Okay, the timeline diverged a bit ago, so it's not our future anymore, clearly. But magic came back like about 2000, I think, in the original Shadowrun lore, and then it's about 60 years ahead, like most standard, in terms of where it is from us. Is it? I can't remember exactly when magic originally came back, but magic comes back. You get some new races, but and corporations manage to basically take over the world. I mean, they're not technically governments still exist, technically, but once you start giving corporations the right to personhood for legal matters, and then you get a few and cybernetics and magical enhancements in various ways, and then a few corporations manage to basically make themselves too big to fail, or too big to really ever do any real damage to, even, at least realistically, then yeah, so you've got like the mega corporations who are just, yeah, all of them have a finger in every single pie. I'm sure they have specialties, but you want something, any of them will be able to provide it to you for a cost. Pretty much guaranteed. Now, of course, given that they have specialties, some of them will provide you certain better quality items of certain things, or will be able to provide you the same quality at lower cost, or whatever, but the basic foundational principle is there. And, of course, well, it's a cyberpunk setting, so let's face it, for most people, the world is a pretty terrible place. And for the smaller corporations, and, well, hell, even the mega corporations, well, it's not like corporate espionage goes away. It just, well, when you're allowed to hire private armies and basically treat people as, and when you have more authority than the governments who are in theory in control, and you can get away with an awful lot. Let's face it, right? One of the larger companies are one of the more profitable companies out there are the company that provide policing to a number of people. So when you do the policing, you can get away with an awful lot of stuff. So you start hiring on, at least legally. Well, not legally, but without getting caught by the law, you get away with an awful lot of things. And of course, it adds a level of corruptibility into the entire chain, which is helpful for other people wanting to get away with things. So deniable assets become the way to go, right? You hire in people who aren't directly affiliated, with a paper trail. You get rid of any. You make sure there's no paper trail. You make sure there's no way anyone could trace things back to you, at least not reasonably, and then hand some people a paycheck to go do whatever it is you need done. And that's kind of the whole idea of Shadowrun. Now, of course, there are idealistic people that run in the shadows, right? There are trying to actually bring the corporations down and make active, significant change in that way. And there are people who run the shadows because they just want a paycheck. And there are people in between who are somewhat idealistic. They have aims, but they're also recognise they might not be able to get them and are not willing to sacrifice themselves for those aims, right? And everything in between, But that's, just one setting. I don't know. Another interesting one might be, we're currently on break, but we've got a group we play Dungeons and Dragons with currently, 5th edition. We're not moving to 1 D&D or whatever they want, or 6th edition, whatever it's going to end up being called, because we refuse to buy it, because Hasbro suck as a company. And more specifically, there's a lot of mess with that particular section of the company. They make Magic Gathering and D&D stuff. They called Pinkerton. They called the Pinkertons on someone relatively recently for a start. Okay, this is Magic Gathering drama as well, admittedly, but they also were caught using AI art for Magic Gathering cards, which is something we have a hard stance against. And of course, they were not great with the whole useful taking on feedback when they first released the beta testing for 6th edition, or play testing for 6th edition, or 1D&D, or whatever they want to call it, and they're clearly making an attempt to force out any other online tabletop options in favour of their own one on D&D Beyond, which looked to, and probably still does look to, include a large number of microtransactions in it, which is obviously something we were against. I tend not to be a massive fan of microtransactions in general. It's especially not for something where, I understand if you're offering a completely free-to-play game, right, you need some way to make money on it. And sure, microtransactions are a way of doing that. That makes some level of sense. But half the thing with, the whole point of Dungeons and Dragons is that you buy the books, and you've got the books and you can play whenever, wherever, right? You just need a pen, some paper, and the books. You only need, one copy of the book between everyone as well. Well, you probably want the Player's Handbook and the DMG. But as long as you've got those 2 books between your entire group, you can play. You don't need the rest of the books. Hell, you don't even need the DMG. The Player's Handbook will do. It's a little sparse on opponents outside of, humanoid, potential player characters, effectively. Outside of NPCs, but you don't need those. So you can get away with just the Player's Handbook for an entire party, if you want to. That is what it is, right? And then moving away from that, seemingly, which is a problem, because that kind of goes against the whole ethos of, in our opinion, what should be the ethos of tabletop role-playing games and their creation. But yeah, anyway, our particular setting that we're on hiatus from currently is other players are taking the opportunity to GM a little bit whilst we figure out the plot for campaign 2 specifically, for the second campaign in the world. But yeah, it is, a shattered world. There was a catastrophe in the past that we're not going to go into too many details on because that's spoilers for our players specifically, but whenever there might be people watching, and even if they're not, well, anyway. So, but yeah, there was a great catastrophe in the past, and the world got shattered to save a remnant of what it was, effectively. And the shattered remnant is now up in the sky on a series of floating islands that, And there's something deep down below, and most of the time, well, yes, there's practically there's near enough no ways of going down and surviving. It's very, very likely anyone that goes down there dies. So, and then, up above, it's just a world of floating islands that are, capable enough, between fishing for fish from the sky, slightly low down in the sky before you hit the depths where you can't return from. And, the islands themselves, some of them are large enough to hold a level of agriculture and the like. It's workable, and then Magitech gives you airships, so yeah. I've got airships and the space and islands, and yeah, there's sky pirates, of course, and dragons, and questionable governments and all of this. And yeah, it's just it was initially made for a one shot, or like want to run an airship. I was like, hey, okay, we're gonna run a one shot that's gonna be a race between some airship crews. Let's go. Party will be one airship crew, and we'll have a couple others that were NPCs that we're just gonna have them race against. See how that goes. And then a lot happened. An awful lot's happened since then, but that was how the first couple sessions went. What was supposed to be one shot did not take one session. But that's okay, that happens all the time. And then it turned from a one shot into a full campaign, which we were not expecting, but it's been great. It's been really fun. It was great running it, and it's been great fun the entire time through. And finally, we're now on break before we come back for season 2, which will also be fun, hopefully. Anyway, I think I've rambled for enough. It's been Empty of the Sphere System, signing out.